Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits using technology. Joining me today is Erik Rubadeau to talk about building teams and other team building type of activities. Erik, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Pleasure to be here.
So I'm curious to know, as a starting point, is what is your superhero origin story? That is to say, how did you get started working with nonprofits?
It's a good question. I love the way you framed it. I think I fell into it accidentally. I'm have a degree in political science and a previous career in forestry. So you kind of wonder how does one end up here? I was living in Toronto after university, and I suppose in political science I'd become aware of the sort of the third sector, the NGO universe, and all the things that come with that. But I'd never really considered what it meant to work in that sector. And I was in Toronto doing foreign service exams. Actually, I intended to go and try to work in the foreign service. Started volunteering with a nonprofit organization called Journalists for Human Rights, just to sort of round out my time in Toronto, I guess. And that ended up being a pretty hard left turn for me. I never never finished my I did my foreign service exams, but I never followed through with it. I started working with this Journalists for Human Rights, and just really, I suppose, got excited about what they were doing. It was really interesting work. They were a very small organization. I think we were all working. There was like 8 of us, I think, working in an actual closet in the office of a helicopter company, a kind of mid-Toronto area. I think the fellow Ben that started it, he had family connections that had somehow gotten the space. But so I worked with them for a while, doing all kinds of stuff I had no idea how to do. I threw their annual fundraising event. I launched their first direct mail appeal. I helped with the website. All kinds of just day-to-day things. And for me, I guess I have been taking things apart my whole life. I used, when I was like 10, I was building computers. My first radio, like my first stereo system, my dad gave it to me in a pile of parts. So I've just been technically inclined, I guess. I think it's genetic, perhaps. My dad has a degree in music, but actually ended up being in electronics. So I suppose that just comes naturally. But yeah, I think for me I was really interested and kind of drawn to what was happening in the nonprofit sector. Certainly really enjoyed my time at Journalists for Human Rights. And then from there was recruited into a consulting firm that was at the time really specializing in how to take the internet, if you will, back in, this is what, 2004 or 5, somewhere around there. What was the sort of the digital space at that time, and how do organizations fit into this? How do we help nonprofits, get a hold of this and make sense of it? So yeah, working, that was kind of my entryway, I suppose. I started with a small nonprofit organization and ended up working with a consulting firm specializing in kind of making, I don't want to say making things up, but, really learning as we go, right? Like everything was a test, everything was a trial, everything was, does this make sense in the sector or not? So it was pretty cool, pretty fun.
Yeah, I call that building the plane as you're flying.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I've used that metaphor before too. I think my team gets a kick out of that one when I use it.
And then taking apart radios, or putting radios together, that reminds me of another title, which I call Tinker. Someone
Yes.
who likes to tink with things.
I am very much a tinkerer, a repairer. I have actually during COVID, when the whole family was in the house, I have, my wife calls it my crazy little room, but there is a little room in our house that lives kind of off the back through the laundry room, and it just looks like a mad scientist's workshop. There's tools all over the place, half finished projects everywhere. There's a 3D printer, and there's just all kinds of stuff in there that probably it's a good reflection of like what my brain wants to do sometimes, which is just sort of take things apart and see how they work and figure out, once you understand its core, then you can figure out how to use it or put it back together.
It's a man cave.
Yeah.
A lovely man cave for all the engineers and tinkers out there. That is a real true man cave.
Yeah, it doesn't have a big screen TV or a leather couch. It's got soldering irons and more tools and bits and screws and whatnot. And yeah, it's fun. My kids are convinced that I can fix anything, which is great. So so far so good.
We're getting a bit off topic here, but it reminds me of my dad as well because I remember very clearly when I was younger living at my parents' place. My dad also is an engineer, and we had like a toaster that was like 20 or 30 years old, and he just kept on repairing it and repairing it. Like this thing was supercharged by the time he was done every time he did it, and it lasted like way, way past its expiration date. And
Yep.
it sounds similar here.
Yeah, I have a number of things like that in my life.
So fast forwarding to today, then, what is it that you do today? How would you describe, let's say, in a quick elevator pitch, what you do today and how you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think, 13, 14 years ago when I started this company, I started it because I liked doing all the things. I loved fundraising and marketing. I was clearly fascinated with technology, and I really love nonprofits. So that's where I kind of started. When I left the consulting firm I was at, I went out on my own and just started working with a couple of organizations. And over the last, I guess, almost 14 years now of growing a company, I still get to do that, but now, now I have a team. I am I'm the CEO of a 20-person team, that has, my responsibilities are pretty different than they used to be, and my day to day is pretty different. But I think the way that my brain works, the way the way that I like to approach problems, I really do like being challenged, and I think that that's the reason that I've enjoyed kind of growing the company up to where it is now and working into, the joke is that I've had every role in the company. At some point I was doing design or web development or, client account management or, deep in digital fundraising data or running marketing campaigns. So at some point I've been a little bit of all of what we do. And my role now is to help guide a team of experts to be way better than I ever could be. And it's pretty cool. It's actually really, obviously it's got its challenges, but I really do like the challenges that I'm being put to now. And I think there's something really magical, maybe is the right word, about starting. I refer to it as like spinning plates, right? You start spinning a plate and, you've got a few plates spinning, and then you bring someone in and they just spin the plate so much better than you could because it becomes their focus, right? When you're kind of like I am, I guess, which is easily spread over a lot of places and really fascinated with a lot of different areas, I'm probably never going to become a super, like an absolute deep expert in any one area. I'm going to be really, well familiar in a lot of different areas, which is, I think, a strength in its own. But there's something really beautiful about hiring a team and bringing in people who just take it to the absolute next level. And my role now is to empower them, is to connect them to the clients, is to, connect them with other team members, is to give them an environment in which they feel safe and secure in their, like, I suppose in their employment, but also like in their workspace, right? Like safety is where you don't get creativity if we don't feel safe. And so my role really now is to try to create safety and, a place where people feel that they can really be creative and push the boundaries and push the edges and do what they think is right.
There's something to be said about someone who can do a lot, that has not only a curiosity, but also a capability of doing many different things. And to your point, maybe you don't go too deep in them, but at least you have that knowledge. And I'm curious to know, do you think that gives you an advantage to them to be able to hire people that you can recognize that are better than you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing, is that I think it's what's been so great in going through the process is, sometimes there are certain things that you can train and you can teach people and you can guide them towards. And there are certain things that I think are just really hard, are kind of more like, what type of person are you and what are the things that you want to be interested in and how does your brain work and all the things that go with that. And so for me, finding, when we go through the hiring process and finding someone that, like, yes, they're technically capable, but you can also just sort of see that spark of potential, like, I don't know how else to put it, but like, when you come across someone and this has happened, I think, in a number of cases when we've gone through the hiring process, when we've brought someone into the team and you go, this candidate might have been technically more proficient, but this one is going to go way further. They're way more passionate about it. They, and they have a ingrained sense of learning. I think that's one of those things that I've come to realize as we've grown team is like people who want to continue to learn, people who are, love being challenged, and are passionate about a specific area, whether it's data or fundraising or systems or or web development or design, being able to hire people that are and bring them into a team and then bring that team together, where people are really committed to the idea of continual learning. I love that. And because I think for me, that's the thing that has probably made, that and a bit of luck has probably made me successful in growing this team and bringing everything together. But it is, the willingness to say, yeah, we will figure that out. Like that's a thing that we need to learn how to do, because it's going to benefit us, but also it's going to benefit our sector. You only have to look at what we're, the research and the work that we're doing in artificial intelligence and generative AI right now to know that, yeah, is it the stuff that people need right now in their day? No. Is it the stuff they're going to need pretty dang soon? Yes, absolutely. So that for us is, we need to stay on the edge. And that means we have to have a culture of learning, seeing that in people and being able to kind of set them free is really, it's beautiful. I love it.
I've noticed the same kind of trend where it's great that you might have a lot of technical knowledge and be really, really good at one specific thing. But if you can't communicate that, if you can't express that, or you're not passionate, you don't want to keep on exploring, you think you know it all, so you kind of stop the search or exploration of new knowledge. Mm-hmm. I think the latter is easier to teach, or the former rather, the technical skills is easy to teach on the job versus that passion, that explorer mentality, which is harder to teach and maybe more valuable. And I can make that same kind of sense from you now. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the word. I don't think I've ever heard it put that way. Explorer mentality. That's a beautiful way of putting it, because I think that's what separates, I think, organizations that push forward and organizations that just do. And I think there's nothing wrong with being an organization that does. But I think, the thing that I love, and then I'm probably going to borrow this expression, this explorer mentality, going forward, because I think it really just kind of clicked for me, is like the growth. The opportunity is not in how we used to do. It's how we could be better. It's how we could do something different. It's how we can combine. It's maybe one of the things I love about being spread across so many different areas and kind of having that interest in a number of spaces is, I really like connecting dots. I love when, something that we're doing in one part of our team is working on, I see the connection to another part of what our team is working on, and like I get to kind of bring that together and say, let's talk about how your skills and your skills could actually combine to solve this problem together. And I think we've learned so much in terms of core areas of knowledge, and the really interesting stuff is where these cores cross over, right? Like I think that's kind of the next big thing, is like, well, how do we actually start to merge these core areas together and make us all better by learning what's on the edges where these things overlap.
I got the impression many years ago that one of the key skills of a good manager, director, someone, an executive, was being able to recognize the skill set of a particular individual and then positioning that person in the right project or area of expertise, and then matching it with potentially other people. To your point, 1 + 1 = 3, where they have a bit of overlap, but between the two of them, they can cover much more distance together. And I would ask, so aside from being able to know and recognize a bit of skills in each person and maybe this overlap, are there any other, for people, for example, listening, trying to build the best team possible, are there any kind of other tips or things to look out for that you could recommend to say, if you find this kind of person, or if you're trying to fulfill this kind of role, here's what you should consider?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think a lot about team and team building and what, where have we made mistakes and where have we gotten things right. The thing that I would probably say is most important to team building is, beyond just all the technical of what people can do and the idea of combining people into a team, there has to be this initial value of collaboration and like honest communication, and that's easier said than done. It's when you're a small team and everyone kind of sits back to back, it's easier to have the relationships. It's easier to be connected. It's easier to just know inherently how your team is doing and where you could, you can see it. You can say, okay, I can help these two work better together by, taking them out for lunch, or, helping them see these things about each other. That's really part of their, their ability to connect. And so providing that space where people feel safe, providing that safe place where people feel like they're, the rules of being part of this team are defined, and that's, like clear respect, open communication, all the things that come with that. And so, I think for me, that's been the thing that I've probably leaned into over the last number of years, is trying to create a space where people feel respected, and that they understand that, respect is both earned and given. And that, that's one of those things that I think is really important to start in that. Apologies, my 6-year-old is home with me today, and he's decided that right now is a good time to turn on the drum set. So I'm just going to click the door closed.
No worry, I can't hear it actually at all.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, the team building mentality. So collaboration, honesty, honest communication, rules, respect. I find there's a difference between honesty and transparency. For me, honesty is, obviously being honest, but transparent is an aspect of just really communicating, yes, honestly, but also sharing things. Like some people might say that holding back information is a type of being dishonest. I would agree, but I would call it more about being not transparent.
Yeah.
And I think that transparency element is a crucial part of being part of a good team.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think when people feel like there's information that is being shared that they are not privy to, it instantly creates, I think it puts people in a position of, you never want people on their back foot. You never want a team member to feel like there's something that they feel they're being left out of. And so we have actually tried very, very hard. And I will say that I think the transparency is a really key way to think about it. Is we have very high levels of transparency both internally and with our clients. So when we do projects, we actually run everything through public boards, not public to the public, but public to the team. So, even the executive director of that organization can pop into the project and see everything, all the communication, all the pieces that are going, where we are, the project timeline, all the conversations. And so I think by having public, or not public, but like visible conversation, having everything very transparent, it gives people the confidence that they don't feel like there's any information that is, that they're not privy to, and that makes them feel less safe. Because I think no one wants to feel like they're being left out. No one wants to feel like they are, outside of key information, that there's decisions that are being made outside of the decisions that are being publicly talked about. So yeah, I would say that, that piece around transparency is really, really critical. And I think we've tried really hard to be transparent, both in our clients and with our projects and all that, but also internally, to be really transparent.
Yeah, there's a whole line. I mean, up until now, we've been talking about mostly, or at least I've been interpreting the communication, the team building between the team. But you're right, there's a whole different aspect between the team and the client, which we'll get to maybe just a bit later on. I'm also curious to know about the aspect of transparency and knowledge, in the sense that there are some people who don't necessarily want to share all of their knowledge with people because then they might seem less important, or maybe it's an ego thing, or it's like, I'm a specialist, I want to stay a specialist and be perceived at least as valuable. And if I share everything that I can share, then my value goes down. Is there do you find any truth to that in the context of team building? Or do you really try to foster the idea of, when you learn something, share it with the team, because others can learn from it, and then they can maybe give you feedback and even get you better or further based on their feedback?
Yeah, and actually, I think it goes back to something we were talking about earlier. One of the traits that I think we've accidentally, maybe, but now maybe a bit more intentionally hire for, is giving. Is this idea of people who are generous with their information, generous with their time, and we have a really lovely culture that has come from that, of sharing. And I think so. That to me, actually, just to say, like, I think maybe it was not intentional, or just sort of off of a feel or a vibe to start with. But I think it's something that we've noticed over time, that, like, creating a team of people who are comfortable and realize the value of giving has become really, really important. And that's a big piece of our team and how we operate. It means that information doesn't bottleneck, because information is currency, really. In our current work environment, information and knowledge is currency. It's your unique value. But I think if you can create a place where people feel that it is not about, if you hire into for people who are, really want to see something happen, want to be part of a team, then they inherently understand, or at least come to understand, that if you're holding information back from your team is not going to grow. And if other people are holding information back from you, you're not going to grow. So information is kind of like watering plants, right? Like sharing it is going to help us all grow. And there's no, it's not a zero. What is that? A zero sum game? Is that the right way to refer to it? Like there's always more to be had. And like whether that's the abundance mindset that you hear people refer to, but like the idea that knowledge is really, really important, but we all are learning different things in different areas all the time. Like we have part of our staff meeting has a dedicated time to two things actually every time. Even if we have nothing to talk about, we have two things that we do every staff meeting. One is it's an opportunity for us to say thank you. So we spend the first 2 to 10 minutes, depending, just saying thank you to each other. People calling each other out for saying, hey, this person really helped me with that. This person really helped me with this. Thank you for everybody who covered me while I was on vacation. Like we have, I think, have been able to build a real culture of appreciation for each other. And, when you work as an agency with clients, when you work on the outside, it is inherently thankless. That is part of the role. You might pull off the most successful campaign a client has ever had, or you might walk them through guide them through the most technical, digital transformation from a technology perspective or data migration that they've ever been through. And it was, a blinding success. No one's going to throw you a party. It's your job. Right. So it's one of the things that we've tried to do for ourselves is to be really appreciative of each other, because, it's not something that we really get often from the outside world. And fair enough and fine. I think that there's benefit to expanding that and for people to, be more appreciative of each other. I think it goes a long way, but it's something that we do for ourselves every staff meeting. The other thing we do is we talk about, we have just, what have you learned? What is something that you think the team should know? And whether that's, hey, we launched this product. Hey, we did this, this is this cool thing we learned. Hey, here's a red herring that we found, or here's a pitfall we found with this particular thing. That our goal is to just share the information, because it is something that, as running a 20-person team now, information, it's harder and harder for information to just flow naturally. Going back to when I was a journalist for human rights, we were, 6 people back to back in a closet. Information just flowed through the room. And certainly, in the early days of Yeeboo Digital, when there were 3 or 4 of us, again, working in a small office, information naturally flowed. And even when there was 12 of us in an office, information still naturally flowed. There were some parts where, you'd say, oh, this person was at an office that day, so they missed this information. But, since, we completely decentralized 6 months into COVID, and have stayed that way since. So we're a completely decentralized organization now. So information sharing and knowledge transfer and moving information through and making sure that everyone has visibility on it, that's incredibly, if not the most crucial thing that we have to do. Because as soon as we're not intentional about that, how that information moves through our organization, people will get scared. People will feel like they're being left out. People will feel like there's something that is happening to them or happening without them. And so, you have to have a culture where people can really trust. And that is not something that you create once and, say, great, we trust each other now. Like it is constant. You always have to be working on it. And that comes through, time that we take with each other. We spend some time every couple of weeks on like just some virtual games where we just come together and just play. There are these little things that you have to do to go beyond just working together, because you have to be, everyone knows what it feels like to work in a place where you're really not that jazzed about it. Where the culture is more negative than positive. The expectations are never aligned with the outcomes. And as much as we try to have that, it's not without saying, it's not to say that we haven't had failure. We've learned so much along the way. No one is perfect by any means. But the key is if you can maintain that culture of trust, that culture of cooperation, that culture of respect, that you do have to work on, and a culture of knowledge sharing and empowering others, and there's a podcast that I love to listen to, Shane Parrish, the Knowledge Project, and this, I think his slogan is, learning the best of what other people have already mastered, right? And I love that. I love what he's doing, but I love that as an idea for sharing amongst a team, right? Like, you only have to have, like, I'm never going to know the depths of data analysis or web development, but people on my team can bring up and share to me and to the rest of the team why this new development is so important, or why it's something that we can completely ignore, or why it's a thing that is going to make a wave or not a wave, and what we should know about it. And it makes us as a group so much smarter. It makes us as a group so much better, so much more contextualized. In the consulting firm that I worked at before I started Yeeboo, it was more individual consultants. It was more like, what you knew was your value, and we were kind of islands in a sense. We still, some of the best people I've worked with are still, good friends from that time, and people, I think it was very much sink and swim. And those who swam, I think, have gone on to do incredible things, and people I'm really proud of to call friends and colleagues. But definitely more of an island type environment than what we're trying to do, which is really a collaboration and an actual real team where, as much as we can, we're trying to share that information around to each other. We're trying to have intentional structure around it, because it is really important.
I've heard that one of the ways to make yourself personally happier is to, on a daily basis, express gratitude. That either in the morning or the evening, you spend a few 10 minutes, writing a list of things for which you are grateful for. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time I've heard this applied in a group setting or in a company setting. So that's actually lovely to hear. And I'm happy to see that it can work actually in that kind of environment, because that is a core principle of really improving your level of your state of happiness personally.
I mean, I love seeing how happy people are when they're thanking other people. It's really interesting to see. You can see the genuine gratitude, because you can see that, like, how much they appreciate it, but also how good it feels to be able to express that.
They said actually that they write that the number one reward that an employee can receive is not necessarily money. That usually ends up being number two. It's recognition. When employees are recognized for the work that they're doing, either by their peers or by their superiors, that gives them the greatest sense of satisfaction, and that will keep them as a happy employee. Of course, employment or monetary gains and incentives have to be there, but they don't necessarily leave a company because of that. They leave because they're not feeling satisfied and recognized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's, there's a lot to be said about, I think, what our sector is capable of that way. I think that maybe it's a harder conversation to have in the corporate sector. The focus it seems to be much more on that money side of things. And it's not to say that, it's not important. People need to survive. We all need to pay our bills and all the things that go with that. But I think it's something that our sector could, I would love to see more organizations embrace that, because I think there's such a high turnover rate in our sector. And sometimes I wonder if it's just that, we haven't really figured out how to build teams in our sector. If, I don't know exactly what it is. I have lots of theories, but, I think that, to your point, creating a culture in an organization where people feel appreciated and seen can go a long way. And I know those organizations where people are doing that, and some organizations where it doesn't have that feel at all. And certainly people would feel, at least from the outside, seem a lot happier and more. You're more willing, I think, to go through the bumps of employment, which or work, or whatever it is we call it. But I think if you like the place that you're at, and liking the place that you're at comes from liking the people you're with and feeling like they respect you and they see you, and vice versa. And you're given a chance to express yourself, but also given a chance to be like, gratitude is not something that we just made up. It's we feel good when we do it, and I think that that's really important. It seems deeply rooted to me. So Those are things I like to try to focus on when I'm thinking about, how do we make our team better? How do we make our team happier? What are the things that we can do? We always want to be more thoughtful, and sometimes when you're really, really busy, it's hard to be thoughtful. You get to the end of the day and you go, oh man, I really wish I'd sent that person an email. It was their birthday today, and I, kind of missed it. So we're actually trying to be really intentional and about, being thoughtful. We have actually a little subcommittee in our team that's just kind of focused on, what are the things that we could be doing to make other people on our team feel good and happy, and same with our clients. So this is something that we're trying to be really intentional about, because it's not that we don't want to do it; it's that it's really easy to lose it in the work. And so you do have to be intentional about these things. They don't just, they may naturally spring up, but they may not naturally stay. Because everyone gets busy, and it's easy to let those things go as lower priority. But I think if you want that, you have to prioritize it. It's the same reason why, even if there's nothing on our team meeting, we still get together. We don't cancel it and say, no meeting this week, no agenda. There is always a point on the agenda, and that point on the agenda is a chance to say thank you to everybody else on the team.
As you moved from being more in one location physically to this more decentralized, more remote, how do you foster that kind of togetherness, that bond between people? You mentioned virtual events or virtual games. Maybe you can give us some examples of those kinds of situations, and anything else that you guys do to keep that closeness together, even though you're physically far apart.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that we do, and there are things that we want to do. One of the things that we do now is we do get together. We do actually come together physically, once to twice a year. A little bit of a team retreat with a focus on talking about ourselves, for sure, but also with a focus on just giving ourselves a space to spend a couple days together. Whether it's our last one was an escape room we did in Toronto, not because we wanted to prove to ourselves that we can get out, but hey, this is a chance to do something that's different, stretch ourselves in a different way, have dinner with each other. And so I do think, as much as I love decentralized, there's still value in face-to-face, absolutely. And that's something that we're going to continue to do, as best we can, as much as we can, is to offer those chances to come together a couple times a year, because it does go a long way, I think, in terms of creating real human relationships. Other things that we do on Mondays, I run a thing called CNC, Caffeine and Collaboration, which is, it morphs. It's a little bit different every week. Sometimes it's, we talk about things that are happening in our industry, but it's a chance for us to foster conversations about topics that, maybe we don't get a chance to cover in the day-to-day work. So that's one thing that we do. I mean, it's a chance to align around our values, align around decisions that we're making. We've been talking about, I think we've probably been talking about artificial intelligence now at least every other week, if not almost every week, for the last 6-8 months. Because it's a lot of things shifting in there, in that space. And I think it's important that we stay up to date on that. But it's really interesting because we all come at it from different angles. We'll have different points of view, and I think that type of conversation, this sort of free flow conversation, is really important. One of the things I've learned about that, over the last number of years, is big group conversations are great, but actually smaller group conversations are better. So, sometimes with CNC, we'll have a bit of a topic to come together and talk around, and then we'll just break into breakout rooms, just to make the conversations a little bit more personal. So putting people in 2, 3, 4 person groups and just chatting about the subject. And sometimes we just, there isn't much to cover on CNC, so sometimes we cancel it, but sometimes we just come together and we just do breakout rooms, and that's 45 minutes in the morning. You bring your cup of coffee or your cup of tea or whatever it is for you, and you just sort of shoot the breeze with your colleagues. And I think the benefit of that kind of thing is that, as an organization grows and as we work in the different areas that we work in, it's easy for, some people are going to have natural crossover every day. Certain project teams are going to work closely together in certain things, but that also, on the flip side of that, means that there are going to be some parts of our team that don't cross over very much. So it's about having those crossover points for the rest of the team. If it's one of our data specialists doesn't really cross over with this developer or something. Like it's just about making sure that they end up in a breakout room together once a month or something, just to connect, learn about each other, talk on a topic. Other things we do, some things we have this tradition actually goes back to when we were in the office, but we have a Meme It Fridays, which is something where everyone posts their favorite meme for the week, trying to be safe for work as best we can. And then we vote on them. So there's a grand winner every week. We actually used to have a funny little trophy that we handed out when we were physically in the office, but these days we just the person is recognized and they get to make an acceptance speech. But that's those, it's the little things, because it's really easy to fill up your 9 to 5 with meetings and calls and working sessions. And so I think in terms of, creating team culture, those are the things you have to do, intentionally outside of that. We have to think about, having things where it's like, well, where do we get together and talk about changes in our sector? Where do we get together and talk about, things that are in the news, things, crises that are happening, breakthroughs in technology? Like, where do we just get a chance to come together and talk about and share that kind of information? But then also having on the flip side something like the Meme It that we do on Fridays, and the virtual games that we run every couple of weeks, as a place that, and it's not mandatory. That's the other thing. You are not required. Like, I forget what it is. Like, mandatory fun is not fun, right? Like, it has to be something you want to participate in. So, when it comes to things like Meme It's, we've got some people that are on it every week, and some people, every other week, maybe it's every couple of weeks. Whenever they find a real piece of gold that they love, they bring it, and so it ebbs and flows. Some weeks we've got, everybody's posted something. Other weeks it's just it's a smaller group, 4 or 5 of us. But there's consistency in it, and also, something that I think is really, really valuable and has progressed over time is that, I'm not the one setting these up. Meme It is run by a couple of people on our team. The virtual games is run by a couple other people on our team. I lead the CNC primarily, but our team meeting is run by a different person every week. Every week, someone else runs the team meeting. We use a Slack bot to run basically a random generator to pick one person from the team, and that person leads the charge the following week. So, it's the little things like that, I think, that help create shared experience, which is really important to team structure and to team culture.
I'm loving what I'm hearing. I mean, it really sounds collaborative and supportive, amazing team building. And now my brain, as you were talking, was thinking to the person that's listening, the leader says, oh my goodness, what about all that billable time that is being sucked away? How do you balance that culture element with the fact that, of course, as an organization, you need to make money and build a client? Like, how do you balance the two? How do you carve out space so that you're not only team building or emphasizing team building at the expense of not charging the client for your time and actually delivering projects?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think, and it's I don't know if it's something that we've really had to go too deep on. I mean, I guess for me, like, the cost of losing a team member, the cost of acquiring a team member, like, these are big costs. I think this might be bigger than just our sector, but like, we have a tendency to just think that, okay, we've hired for a person, therefore that person now is at 100%. I've always believed that it takes a person a year in a role to just have enough context to be able to say, okay, I'm beyond knowing what I'm doing. Now I know why I'm doing it. So team culture for me is really, really important. Those, like, to say it's, I definitely understand the question, like, that it's, we're trading potentially billable time we could be spending on, on calls with clients. I think there's also a lot to be said about, when you have to hire someone and bring them into a team, that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of, that person's not at 100% for, probably a year realistically, maybe less than that, but they really need that year of context to be able to start to make that role their own. On the inverse of that, when you lose someone, you're losing, yes, job function, but you're losing institutional knowledge, you're losing perspective, you're losing, all the ways that this person made that role unique. So I have long believed that these pieces that we try to do to maintain culture are really important for making a place that people want to stay. And that in itself is really valuable, right? It may be more valuable than billable time some days. Obviously it's not something, we can't just spend our whole time, hanging around the campfire and having laughs, but I think it's really important that we have some of that time, that there is time dedicated to creating team culture, because if you don't have a culture that people want to be a part of, because you can't force people to be a part of culture. Like, you can't force people to be part of your team. You have to create an environment where people want to be part of that. And that's the thing that I think is, that's the investment that you make into that time, or that time that we put together. Like, that is so important, because people will come and people will go, and that's just natural. But if you can get people to stay because they want to stay, I think there's a lot of value in experience. And that's something that I think strategically has been really important to me since the beginning. Here's something. Been running this organization now since 2010. The first person we hired is still with us. And so I think that that's really important, right? She's had a number of roles over the years, but that says something, I think, and she'll be the first to say, not everything's perfect, right? Like, this is all just, we're trying. This is all putting in the effort. But, there's something about what we're doing that's getting people to stay. And I think that is probably part of it, the culture, the camaraderie, the opportunity for a challenge. Hopefully that people feel like they're not being micromanaged, but they're also not being unsupported, right? Like, there's that fine balance between, saying like, yes, let me keep you stable while you, flap your wings and learn to fly, but I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'll tell you what I know about it. I'll tell you everything I can, but, once you're flying, my goal is to just keep you in the air, and for you to learn how to do that, and not to tell you when to bat your wings, or, when to do this or that, because that, we all learn so much better through experience, and even negative experience. I was talking about this with someone the other day, like, I don't want to shout. I don't want to create a place where we, because I can do something for someone, doesn't mean that I should. I think there's a lot to be said for letting people make their own mistakes, but there's also a lot to be said for helping by ensuring that there's guardrails. Letting people make their own mistakes until, that is beneficial and constructive for them, not to the detriment of them, and not to the detriment of the company or to a client, but letting people make their own small mistakes. I think that's really how we all learn. And it's certainly how we all grow. So, for me, I think that all that to say, to come back to the original question, I think the investment in the time we spend outside of billable hours has actually been something that's made our team stronger and certainly more experienced, because, we aren't having, I would be willing to bet, based on sector and agency turnover rates, we're probably way under that. Because we've, and I think maybe not entirely, but certainly part of it is related to the culture that we're trying to create.
I think it's amazing how there are so much overlap between the skills of being a good manager and the skills of being a good parent. You want your child to thrive, but you do need them to make certain mistakes. You want to provide, like you said earlier, guardrails so that they don't fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they stumble and fall, you don't want to necessarily run over there and pick them up. You want to teach them, all right, so you fell down, now, pick yourself up and let's keep going, kind of thing. So it's almost not a 1-for-1, but there's a lot of overlap between those two roles.
Yeah, big time. Actually, I think I've learned a lot from building team that I've been able to bring to my parenting. And I've certainly learned a lot from parenting that I think I've been able to bring to my team, even if it's just ways that I go about my own day and the ways that I approach things, and the patience and the forgiveness and the willingness that you have to let someone make their own mistakes. Yeah, there's a lot to be said in that overlap for sure.
Awesome. So I think it's a good point, or a good moment, to put a pin in it. I think we covered the main points I was hoping to get out. This has been really, really awesome. Erik, we didn't actually mention the name of your company, so maybe you could give it a mention now, and other ways that people can get in touch with you if they would like to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I think, as I said, I'm founder and CEO at Yeeboo Digital. And so with Yeeboo Digital, we kind of focus in three core areas: technology implementations and websites for clients, digital fundraising and marketing, so really bringing in the traffic and helping people optimize for revenue generation, and then ongoing support. We work with clients in a support services role. So we have this tagline that we use: lead with digital, because we think that digital is that opportunity for everyone to be able to iterate faster and learn more and make faster mistakes, and for our sector to really grow. There's a lot of value in that. So they can certainly find us at our website, or possibly at a conference someday, or just send an email. We're always happy to talk.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.